Campaign 2016, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi joining us live in studio once again this morning, second day in a row. Ted's been with us, which is great. Ted, let's talk about voter turnout in Rhode Island. Some talk about folks in Rhode Island approaching the 2008 level for voter turnout. Was that the case yesterday?
Not in the end, no. The Board of Elections was kind of bullish midday yesterday when they talked to our colleague Julian Pixoto about what they thought they were going to get. They were telling us maybe we'd get to 32%, which would be right there with the huge number of people who showed up back in 2008. But in the end, voter turnout probably closer. We're calculating to around 24%. We saw huge upswing in turnout on the Republican side, more than doubling what we'd usually expect for an election like this. But on the Democratic side, turnout was well down from when Hillary Clinton defeated Barack Obama back in 2008. So story and turnout different depending on which party you look at.
All right, so Bernie Sanders beating Hillary Clinton by double digits here in Rhode Island. How did Sanders do compared to Clinton back in 2008 when she defeated Barack Obama?
So looking at the numbers, Bernie Sanders took 55% in Rhode Island. Hillary Clinton got 43%. That's not quite as good as Hillary Clinton herself had done in 2008 here when she won a 58-40 victory over Barack Obama, but still very impressive win by Bernie Sanders in Rhode Island last night, considering a couple things. First of all, the fact that Hillary Clinton had the entire establishment of the Democratic Party behind her. She had come to visit. Bill Clinton had come twice, including on Monday.
Right.
And nationally, it wasn't a good night for Bernie Sanders, which means he was pushing against sort of the feeling in across the states voting last night. Rhode Island, they got a different story. It's a credit to his team.
So there's an editorial in the Providence Journal describing Rhode Island voters as angry. And I think that's pretty much the case nationwide. Wouldn't you agree with that?
You know, I think angry or at the very least frustrated.
Right.
I think when I went to the rallies over the weekend, when I talked to voters, there's almost an exhaustion you hear from voters, feeling like they're sick of politics. They're sick of feeling like they aren't getting results. They're being promised things and it's not coming through. And I think Donald Trump in particular really is appealing to people who want to kind of, throw out the normal way of doing things and bring in something a little radical compared to what we're used to in politics. It's important to point out that, Trump's big victory in Rhode Island last night he still got fewer votes winning Rhode Island, and Hillary Clinton got losing Rhode Island, because in the end, and this is still a blue state in many ways. But I do think the Journal editorial hits on something. You also heard Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, trying to keep my name straight this morning. It's a little early after last night's results. They both talked a lot about the loss of manufacturing jobs overseas. I think that's just an enormously potent, powerful issue here. I think it's also why they did so well in Bristol County, Massachusetts, right across the border back in March, because these are places that have really been hurt by the rise of China and Mexico in the economy.
All right, so about 30 seconds, Ted. Speaking of having to remember names, pretty soon you're going to only have to remember two, and it looks like it's coming down to Clinton and Trump.
Certainly.
Right.
I think, Bernie Sanders basically was admitting in his statement last night that he is not really going to have a viable path to the nomination. That one, most people are saying, is close to over, though he can stay in the race. The Republican side, there's a decent number of Republicans, powerful Republicans, so they'll never get behind Donald Trump. But if Ted Cruz can't win in Indiana next week, which is make or break for him, I think it's probably going to be over for him. John Kasich's only won one state this whole time. I mean, if it was anyone other than Donald Trump doing this well in the Republican primary, we'd say it's over. It's only because he's such a unique candidate that we think there might still be a chance he loses the nomination.
All right, great stuff as always, Ted.
More now on Campaign 2016 as we bring in WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. So let's talk about Donald Trump. All right, so he had that win in Rhode Island. He also won big when it came to voter turnout. Let's talk about that.
Extraordinary numbers really put up by Donald Trump last night. Rhode Island, obviously being a blue state, usually Republican voter turnout in primaries is lower. This is now, last night's primary, now that all the votes have been counted, is actually the second biggest Republican primary in Rhode Island in the last 25 years.
Wow.
The only one higher was the Chafee Laffey U.S. Senate year in 2006, and it's almost as high as that. Donald Trump, 64% of the vote he took in the end. This now makes Rhode Island his very best state in the country for Donald Trump. Nowhere has he done better. Donald Trump winning 38 of 39 Rhode Island cities and towns last night. John Kasich won Barrington by like a dozen votes, and that's the only win put up by anyone but Donald Trump. Just really, clearly Donald Trump, he brought a lot of people into the process on the Republican side who don't usually vote, and he really united them.
You know, we talk about the top two there, but Ted Cruz, I mean, he struggled mightily in all states, but we learned that he may have missed out on a delegate. How so?
Yeah, so Ted Cruz, you know, his brand of politics has not necessarily played well in the Northeast. We saw he had trouble in New York, he had trouble in Massachusetts, and he really had trouble last night in Rhode Island. The way the Republican rules work in Rhode Island is that you have to get 10% of the vote in order to get any delegates at all. Now, Ted Cruz just cleared that. You got just over 10%, but you also have to get 10% in each of our 2 congressional districts to get delegates there. It looks like we don't have all the numbers yet, neither does the Republican Party. It looks like he missed 10% in one of the districts, which means he handed another delegate to Trump. And with that fight in the Republican Party for every delegate, that was a delegate Ted Cruz sorely needed and should have won, but there just wasn't enough effort by his campaign here.
All right, and Bernie Sanders with the sole victory last night in Rhode Island, but when you factor in the superdelegates, once again, Bernie's losing ground to Hillary Clinton. That's become a very familiar story for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, all 9 of Rhode Island's superdelegates, who include Governor Raimondo, the 4 members of Congress, as well as a few other party leaders, have been with Hillary Clinton. And when you add those 9 to the number I expect her to get here, she does come out with slightly more delegates out of Rhode Island than Bernie Sanders, even though he won pretty easily. That's, of course, why the Sanders folks have been so frustrated by the superdelegate process. At the same time, it's important to remember that when you add up all the delegates won nationally, Hillary Clinton is winning with or without superdelegates, even though she isn't winning. She didn't win Rhode Island because she's doing so well in so many other states.
And before we let you go real quickly, so the voter turnout up for Republicans, but it was actually down for Democrats?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I was just looking at these numbers, and I mean, some of the places, so we had overall about 1/3 fewer votes cast in Rhode Island versus 2008, the big Clinton-Obama race. Johnston, Hillary Clinton's very best city in 2008. She campaigned there just this past Saturday night. Half as many votes were cast in this year's primary. Clinton could not overcome that kind of drop in voter interest in the race.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again, Ted. And we'll have full campaign coverage, of course, on our website throughout the day at WPRI.com.